So a lot of times I hear, I want to create a safe space in my classroom. But taking it one step farther, what is it going to take for my classroom to be socially and emotionally safe for every child? And that means you're going to have to create a brave space. If you're like me in the beginning of my teacher career and you try the safe space first, you will never make it to the brave space because you're so worried about comfort that you'll end up coddling children who really need the gift of truth. Before I really started to become anti-bias, anti-racist, I really felt like racism was about our hearts and our minds, and that if we treated each other with kindness, that we all would have a fair shot. So much of my classroom was prepared for me. Books from my own nostalgia, but I wasn't looking at the power dynamics that were in the book. I wasn't looking at the ways in which stereotypes were being presented in the books or maintained or perpetuated. Another pitfall that I had was just not analyzing my curriculum, not looking at my curriculum and saying, who's missing from the curriculum? Who's missing today? Who did I teach about yesterday but I'm not teaching about today? I did a great job teaching about Indigenous peoples of the past, but not at all teaching about Indigenous peoples of today. And so what does that tell our young learners when we've completely erased them from a narrative? We no longer show them or speak about them, or in the ways in which we teach about them, it comes from a place of victimhood and not from a place of agency and resistance and resiliency and power. Where do I start? Has to be one of the most asked questions in my work. It's so important in the beginning stages and those first weeks of the school as you're building community, as you're building a relationship with your learners, that you're thinking about what makes up this child. We want all children to have self-love for themselves, their family, their culture. So in anti-bias, anti-racism work, we always begin with identity, no matter where they're at. We want our children to know who they are, who they're not. We want them to feel affirmed in the many parts of their identities. That's their personal identity, that's their name and their age, their place in their family, their personality, their likes and their dislikes. Our hope is that as they're moving through the anti-bias framework, they are building their identity, they are embracing differences and having accurate language for others. We want them to feel good about themselves, and whenever they're experiencing oppression, whether on a micro level or on a macro level, that we want it to be able to where it's almost like rubber. It bounces off of them and they're able to accurately diagnose it and say, oh, wait a minute, this isn't me here. This is something that's wrong with the system. I'm not going to internalize it. Instead, I'm going to speak truth to power, and I'm going to continue to feel really good about myself. Our goal is for them to experience what Erik Erikson calls identity harmony, where their inner reality matches their outer experiences. And when you have that kind of harmony and you can go through the world with that harmony, that you're able to achieve to your fullest potential. When it doesn't match it, and our learners are experiencing stereotype threat, and it's chipping away at their identity every time they are being disproportionately disciplined or othered or sent out of the classroom, not only is that chipping away at their reality, but we also have to ask ourselves, what message is that giving the other learners, particularly our white learners? As educators, as K-12 educators, we can no longer live in the land of good intentions. In the land of diversity, your goal just becomes how much can we represent other people but still maintain power dynamics? How much can we represent other people to say we're in fact diverse without over-representing another group? And then there's a land of inclusion, where we're saying, hey, again, you can live in the land of inclusion, where you have people who look different, who are now here in the land, and then we want to be able to hear what everyone is saying. So I want people to be able to share what their challenges are or their successes. We want our learners to be able to say, that's not fair. But we actually just wanted to stop there, where we've all kind of filled out that comment card. You know, we welcome your feedback, and we give them feedback and then nothing happens. A great example is, you know, when we're walking through the hallways, and if you work at a school where the children are expected to be silent or quiet as they walk through the hallways. And so you're walking, let's say you're on your way to the bathroom. So you're walking to the bathroom and you stop and you see another teacher and you're like, hey Deb, and she's like, hey, and y'all chit chat for a little bit. And then you go on about your day. And you might have a learner that says, I don't think that's fair. You know, students can't talk in the hallways, but teachers get to. So now we're in the land of inclusion. And I can have the power to say, thanks for sharing. And I keep walking. Or I have the power to say, you know, I do think that's unfair. And if I had to name it, I wonder what that would be. Like adultism? Is that power hoarding? Why do I think it's okay for me to chat in the hallway but not my learners? And then for us to analyze it and then do something about it. So maybe next time in the hallway when I see Deb, and Deb might say, hey Britt, and I might do, hi. Or I might make a different rule for my class that says, actually, I think it's okay if you talk in the hallway. And be mindful of the other classrooms, be mindful of when doors are open, and just know that someone might call you in and say you're being too loud, or do the famous where a teacher comes to the door and they close the door on you as they stare, and be able to apologize and say, as a classroom, you know, what do we do when a teacher closes the door on us? Everyone should say, I'm sorry. Or, you know, we could write an apology note. When we were in the hallway, we were talking and we were too loud and we disrupted learning, or we took learning from your learners and we wanted to apologize. That is the land, or essentially the world in which we're trying to create. Because we're creating a brave space, how do we share space with one another, being very aware of the ways our social identities interact with one another? And it calls all of us to make more conscious decisions so that, I mean, who wouldn't want to be in a school and where you can call someone in and you receive an apology and say, I'm going to do better next time, right? When you don't have those conversations and you let a child know they come from a place of power, then what happens is I come to your school and I share about anti-bias, anti-racism, and you have folks of the minoritized community raise their hand and say, but isn't that just the way that it is? That we all just play our part and it's always been that way? And you end up creating what is an apathetic reaction to oppression, where now we've washed our hands and we've moved from a phase of feeling helpless as a young child to now feeling hopeless as an adult. And we do not want our young children to feel hopeless. Or as an adult. We want everyone, again, to go back to understand this is the way things have been designed. If I truly believe that racism is learned, then I have to believe that racism can be unlearned. And if I believe that racism is by design, that therefore I have the power to redesign it. We are doing this work so that not only are we reimagining the world in which we live in, we want to live in, but we are actually creating and we're building the world in which we want to live in.